On to law and licensing. Chair Hymas, or is it Vice Chair Carey? You can take it for us. Okay. Vice Chair Carey.
And all those nice adjectives you used to describe Board Member Norton. This will be much more inefficient, but the Law and Licensing Committee has the following motions to make. The first one that you'll see listed in your packet is 4.2, a data sharing agreement with Jordan School District. The committee directed staff to work with JSD to work out, if possible, something less formal to share the data that JSD was looking at, while this board would formulate a more structured policy. And I'm happy to report that the Jordan School District and USB Deputy Jones was able to do that, and so there is no matter for this board to consider. Under 4.4, Granite School District Charter School Authorizer.
Do we need 4.3, Palacios, Bowman, and Larson, or was that tied to Jordan?
Nope, that is, but I don't have a, oh, I do, I'm sorry. Yes, 4.3. This is the amendment to data sharing agreement with Palacios, Bowman, and Larson. And the motion before the board is that the committee recommends that the board approve Amendment 4 to the data sharing agreement with Palacios, Bowman, and Larson. This motion did pass unanimously from Law and Licensing. I abstained at the time only because I didn't find the agreement in backup, but having looked at that, I don't have any objection.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Maybe I could just ask, what is this group working on? What have they been retained to use the data for? Oh, and I didn't mean to make it extensive, but Director Chalice, yeah, maybe just the quick, yeah.
Thanks. Director Chalice, what's my job title? Director. Sorry, Director of Privacy. This is a study that is working to, I'm so sorry, I would need to look at it, but my memory is that this is a study to identify sort of the effect that ELL programs have on students that are language learners. I'll also note that this is an extension of an existing study that I believe was initiated in 2018.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Further questions or comments? Member Bogus?
Well, sir, when you ask questions, I have questions. Is this a law firm?
It sounds more like a research group, but I'm not sure. That research group somewhere?
Yeah, Chair, would you like me to speak
Yeah.
to that? It's a research, researchers from, I believe, University of Virginia. And there is one individual that's involved who is sort of a research consultant, but no, not a law firm.
Okay, thank you. Sure.
And they've incorporated?
The woman so Natalie Bowman, she is the consultant. So my memory is that she actually used to work at the University of Virginia. Now she works as sort of a partner to help facilitate research for the University of Virginia. So yes, she has a company called Interactions Matter, I think. But this is not an agreement with her company. She's just helping arrange the research project and is acting as a consultant for them.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. When we see a data sharing agreement with Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe, we should probably discuss that one a little more deeply. Thank you. And I'm curious where this is, but I don't want to delve into that now. Maybe we can. It sounds like they've been at it. We're probably got some interesting product in the works, but that's for a different date and discussion. Thank you, Director Chalice. Okay, further discussion of the motion. Seeing none, motion is the board approve Amendment 4 to the data sharing agreement with Palacios, Bowman, and Larson. And unless, did you have a, no, that's just the light to run the, okay, please vote.
Klein is a no.
Klein is a no. Member Hymas?
Hymas is yes.
Hymas is a yes. That passes with 12 to 2, the no votes being Member Bogus and Member Klein. Back to you, Vice Chair Carey.
Thank you. This is item 4.4, and that is the Granite School District Charter School Authorizers application. The motion for the board is that the committee recommends that the board approves Granite School District's authorizer processes, and this motion passed unanimously.
Okay, seeing no lights, members please vote.
Imus is a yes.
Imus is a yes. Member Klein?
No.
Member Klein is a no. That passes 12 to 2, with the noes being Member Bogus and Member Klein. Thank you. Back to Vice Chair Carey.
This is item 4.5, R277701, Early College Programs Amendment. And the motion for the board is that the committee recommends that the board approve R277-701, Early College Programs Draft 2 on second and final reading. The motion passed unanimously in law and licensing.
Thank you. Seeing no lights, please vote.
Imus is yes.
Imus is a yes. Member Klein?
Mine is a no.
Member Klein is a no. Oh, Vice Chair Earl? We don't have vice. I heard some, I heard running. She's a yes. Here, you want to? Vice Chair Earl is registering a yes, and that passes 12 to 2, with the noes being Members Bogus and Klein, Member Green being absent. Thank you. Back to you, Vice Chair Carey.
Thank you. This is item 4.6, R277-715, Out-of-School Time Program Standards for repeal. The committee recommends that the board repeal R277-715, Out-of-School Time Program Standards on second and final reading. This motion passed unanimously out of law and licensing.
Thank you. Seeing no lights, members please vote.
I did have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Member Klein. Yes.
Does this mean there are no standards anymore for after school or out of school time?
Who would we
And
like
it's
to?
just wide open to do anything they want, no standards?
I think I see Deputy Stallings.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Angie Stallings, Deputy Superintendent of Policy. This rule was tied to a specific line item program, and the funding was removed or eliminated this last session. So the impact of this rule being repealed is simply to eliminate the program that was eliminated when the funding went away.
Follow up?
Yes.
So the out of school time program is going to be repealed. Does that mean there are no out of school or after school programs anymore?
Deputy Stallings.
No, that does not mean that. LEAs are still able to provide after school and out of school time programs at their discretion. There's just no state funding specific for that purpose.
If I could piggyback, or
So-
go ahead.
May I
Member Klein.
add,
Yes,
I
Deputy
did just get
Stallings.
some information that there still are federal dollars that do come to LEAs for purposes of after school and out of school. So again, this is just related to one specific state program that was eliminated at the legislative level.
Okay, Member Klein.
So are there federal or national standards that the out of school or after school programs have to follow if they're not under us or being funded by the state anymore? And if so,
We're-
what are those standards?
We're getting some discussion, Member Klein. Yes, Deputy Stallings.
So yes, there's a 21st century grant that comes from the federal government, and it does have requirements related to it. So if an LEA were to receive or accept those funds and participate in that program, they would adhere to the standards of, the requirements of that program.
Thank you. Is that something that could be sent to us?
Deputy
Yes.
Stallings or Assistant Superintendent Voorhees? Okay, yes,
Thank
that will
you.
be. And maybe just to piggyback, would these out-of-school time programs still be subject to standards of general applicability, state law governing other areas of ed? Okay, so they're not exempt
No.
from the general rules that apply. They just don't have additional rules that came with the funding for that program. They still have general rules plus whatever rules attached to the federal funding. Is that?
That's correct. And
I'm
mean,
curious whether they're exempt. It doesn't sound like it's
They're not-
exempt. Okay,
right.
from general standards, not going into detail on those. But thank you, Member Bogus.
So for clarity, Chair, are most of Utah's legislative code exempts programs like this from Utah's legislative code?
Is that correct?
For
Is that a
example,
question or a statement?
261 had multiple exemption clauses, except as required as part of a grant program, except as required as part of, except as required. And so while we do have legislative code in this state that has very clear parameters, our legislators have dutifully written many exception clauses in, and I do believe this is one of them.
Okay. Deputy Stallings,
May
did you
I
have
com-
a?
just going to state that to Board Member Bogus's comments, that's true. State law does allow exemptions, and so that's where it gets complicated, because what you asked was whether, because they're getting a federal program, are they exempt from state law? Well, no, because state law exempts. Does that make sense? It's actually state law that would allow that.
So in some respects, specific state law governing general in-school public ed would not apply to these
Not-
out-of-school time programs.
I wouldn't.
Is that a case-by-case question? Or?
Yes, I mean, I think there's one program that I think Board Member Bogus was speaking to, which was HB 261 from last year. Depending on a conflict, if there's state law that conflict, the LEA may want to consider not accepting the funds. But you would look at that on a case-by-case basis, like what is the federal requirement? I mean, it could be that the federal requirement is simply that you're providing after-school programs, and there's not a lot of conflict, or if at all. So it's kind of like we're getting into a legal issue now, where we'd have to look at the facts of the specific requirement and what the requirements are in state law, and we could take a look at that.
Right, and that was what my question went to, so that's kind of a refinement to that. There are maybe a bit of a patchwork, but okay. Member Carey?
May I?
Well, we'll come back,
Sure.
Member Klein. Member Carey's got a light on.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Deputy Stallings, this is a follow-up to what Chair Moss just raised, and it's only tangential to the motion, but it raised an interesting point. Can an LEA request federal funds if the requirements of receiving those funds are in conflict with state law? And Deputy Stallings, that's why I had drafted an email anyway. I was going to send you, so I'll just send you. But since Chair Moss was kind of going down that road, is what got me thinking.
Yes.
And we would love that. That email would give us an opportunity to maybe take a look at it, because I just don't feel prepared at this moment to answer on the spot. But thank you.
Thank you. Okay, it does sound complicated, but that would be helpful to kind of delve into that a little bit. What does govern in the absence of the removal of that particular? Okay, seeing no further lights, please.
I still had a
Sorry. Back to you,
follow-up.
Member Klein. Follow up.
Thank you. Okay, so my question is, if after-school programs or out-of-school programs are going to be governed by federal standards instead of state standards, and that those federal standards may trump state, or if they're in conflict with state, I think there needs to be some kind of parent consent form or a disclaimer that goes to parents that sign up for those programs, that let them know of what the parameters are for this program, what they can expect, and how it is exempt from state law, or it supersedes state law, and in what ways, so that there is full disclosure to parents that sign their kids up for these programs.
Thank you, Member Klein.
That
My
would be
understanding
fair.
is that. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you?
I just said that would be my request of staff to
Got it.
put something together to that effect, if that is based on what they research and find out on these previous questions.
Great, thank you. And my understanding is it would trigger that if there was a grant being applied for that would potentially raise a question of violation of state law, that could be raised with parents. But could that be addressed? I don't know if that's an easy answer, or put that in the memo.
Well, Chair, this agenda item is specific to the repeal of a rule of a state program.
Sure.
And now we're getting into issues of requiring parental consent, which I'm not saying isn't, it's a very important topic. It absolutely is. It just isn't agendized, and it isn't the point of the agenda, if that makes sense. So if there was a desire to bring back either a rule or like a would have to be a rule that requires the LEAs to provide consent. We need to bring that up as a separate rule, but that
Yeah.
could be something if the board's interested in a separate agenda item.
I think the questions and the offered response probably resolves it. I mean, I think the germaneness that I would see is if these standards don't apply, what does? In the absence, if the vote is to repeat, following through with the removal of the funding, the standards go with it. What remains? And so maybe that sounds like it could be addressed with the memo that or response. I don't mean to suggest a full-fledged memo, but I think good questions have been raised, and it sounds like we'll have answers. So if there are no further questions, I think we can vote. Seeing none, the motion is that the board repeal R277-718 out of school time program quality improvement grants on second and final reading.
Klein will abstain.
Klein abstains. Member
Hymas.
Hymas? I'm sorry, Member
Hymas is
Hymas?
yes.
Oh, yes. Did I? I read 718. Is it 715?
I believe it's 7:50.
Oh, okay. I'm looking at the memo. One of those seems to be off. Which is the right one? Is it 718?
There's two.
4.6 is 750. Yeah, you're ahead one, so you're ahead.
Oh, I jumped ahead. Thank you.
Very similar.
Okay, let's see here. I want 715. Let's read it for the record. The motion is that the board repeal R277-715 out of school time program standards on second and final reading. And the vote is open unless somebody got confused by my switching of 718 and 715. Please consider and switch your vote. Hopefully that didn't throw anybody too far off. Okay, looks like we got everybody in. Passes 13-1 with Member Klein abstaining. Thank you. Back to you, Vice Chair Carey.
This is item 4.7, R277-718, out-of-school time program quality improvements grants. This is up for repeal. The motion for the board is the committee recommends that the board repeal R277-718 out-of-school time program quality improvement grants on second and final reading. The motion passed unanimously in law and licensing.
Okay, seeing no lights, members please vote. Member Klein?
Yes.
Member Hymas?
Yes.
Member Klein is a yes. Member Hymas is a yes. And that passes 14-0. Thank you. Back to you, Vice Chair Carey.
Thank you. This is item 4.8, R277-928, High Need Schools Grant for repeal. The motion for the board is the committee recommends that the board repeal R277-928, High Need Schools Grant on second and final reading. This motion passed unanimously out of law and licensing.
Thank you. Seeing no lights, members please vote.
Hymas is a yes.
Thank you. Member Hymas is a yes. Member Klein?
Klein is a yes.
Klein is a yes. And that passes unanimously. Back to you, Vice Chair Carey.
Thank you. Item 4.9, R277-468, Parents Review of Public Education Curriculum and Review of Complaint Process, Amendment and Continuation. The motion before the board is the committee recommends that the board continue and approve R277-468, Parents Review of Public Education Curriculum and Review of Complaint Process, Draft 1, on second and final reading. This motion passed unanimously out of law and licensing.
Vice Chair Earl.
Yeah, I have a substitute motion. I'd like to move draft 2 of R277-468, Parents Review of Public Education Curriculum and Review of Complaint Process. I need a
Okay.
second.
That is in backup. Do we have a second? Vice Chair Carey has seconded. To you, Vice Chair Earl.
Yeah, just a couple of years ago, this is a continuation, which means it's 5 years old. Just a couple of years ago, it was added into code, and it's listed on line 10. So specifically, it adds in for both charter schools, which is the 53G5404, and also for district schools 53G4402, which require LEAs to make instructional materials available for parent review and involve parents of students in the LEA in reviewing instructional materials prior to approval. So the code states that in there. So in articulating that, it's no longer, this is line 14, primary instructional materials, it's instructional materials. The law does not narrow it down. It creates anything that's instructional materials when you read through the law. And then the other provision in on line 25, 28, and 32, it aligns with what is said in code. So in code it says an LEA shall involve parents of students enrolled in the LEA. And that's who is to be involved in this in the item. So I just changed it so it aligned better with what is currently in code.
Any discussion to the motion? Member Lear.
I have a question.
Okay, we've got a motion, then Member Klein will come to you. Member Earl's got a motion, Member Lear,
And I'd like to speak to that
motion
one.
to divide. Why don't you tell us what the division would be, and then we'll see if we have a second.
The division would be the first part of Jenny's motion, which I think
Lines
was,
10 to 12?
10, yes, speaking on line 10, which I agree, something we missed. I
From
don't,
line 26, is that correct?
from line 26 and the others that talk about reflective of the school's community.
Okay, and I think that's 25, 26. I just want to
think
frame it
there's
to see if
another-
we have a second.
But, okay.
Or is it a two-way or a three-way split?
No, it's a two-way split because the
Okay.
other two are, as I'm reading it, are the same,
Yep.
the same issue.
They go to replacing reflective of the school's
Yes,
community. You have a
right.
student of students enrolled in
Right.
the LEA. Okay. So the proposed motion is to divide the changes from Vice Chair Earl's motion in lines 10 through 12 with those proposed in lines 25 to 27, as I understand. Is there a second? Member Booth seconds. Back to you, Member Earl.
Can I-
Lear.
Different organization of
I have
the
a
letters.
very rare form of dyslexia. It
Well,
just
no, it's
switches
just,
your
it's
name
very
and
odd
hers
that we have three board members
and,
that have
Member
The same
Real.
this strange letter combination.
you go.
Anyway, I digress. My feeling is, though, the second part of the motion, the second part that would be divided out, there's no problem with the board being more inclusive and more deferential to LEAs than what the code says. If we made it, if we instead made it more broad or not inconsistent with the code, which I feel like some of you are going to leap up and say, oh, but it is inconsistent because it doesn't say exactly what the code says. I think it is the board's role to elaborate on what the code says and then allow communities to have groups of people work with them who are reflective of their own communities, not just any students.
Thank
parents.
you. Okay. So we're speaking to the motion to divide, but that's the reason for your distinction.
Yes.
So Vice Chair Earl?
Yeah, can I ask a question through you, Chair?
Yes.
Because this is what I've been asking myself is which child is not reflective of the community? And if we're narrowing it down, all children are reflective of the community they live in. But we're saying, and I'm trying to understand what you're saying. You're saying that there's specific groups that should just be looking at the complaints. There's specific groups that should be evaluating. So for example, on number 1, it's that they would be evaluating the purchased instructional materials. But we're going to narrow, I feel like it's narrowing it down, saying that it's only certain reflective groups. Every child is reflective. And so that's why,
So-
if you could clarify
Well,
that.
maybe before too much detail, we're kind of going into the merits of one of the two that might be divided, but I think this feedback has framed up the reasons for the division. So any further discussion to the division? If not, we can vote and then come
Except,
back to the
Chair,
merits.
It may further explain why I think it's important to divide these. But
Okay.
if not just,
Go ahead. I want to
No, it's
reserve
not just
any
a-
depth of that discussion to
It's
if
an-
it gets divided, but yes, to the point of the division.
yes, it's to the point of the,
Okay.
well, I guess I would want to say that I think it's really important to divide this so that we leave as much autonomy with school districts, LEAs, as possible.
Got it. Okay. Now, Member Klein, did you have a hand up?
I just have a question on not the division.
Okay. All right. So the motion is to divide the one which has not been addressed on its merits from the other one, which obviously has some discussion, disagreement on the merits. That's the one in 25-27. So any further discussion of the motion to divide? If not, let's vote.
Imus is a no.
Hymus is a no.
Line is a no.
Klein's a no. Let's see. Klein is a no. Fate of the world hangs in the balance, and that passes 8-6, with the no votes being Vice Chair Earl, Member Hymus, Member Bogus, Chair Moss, Member Klein, and Member Carey. So that is divided. So we have a division between Vice Chair Earl's proposed changes to lines 10 to 12 and those in lines 25 to 27. Is there a motion on either of those? Now that they've been divided.
I would move the first half, whatever that, however we
Motion
divided
is-
it, above line 19 or whatever, however we're dividing that out.
I think everything above line 25, correct?
Oh, yeah.
10 through 14. Okay. Any discussion of that motion?
I do have a question.
Member Klein, yes.
I think you need a second.
Oh, I'm
yes,
sorry, we didn't get a
so-
second. Member Klein, just a second. Now that it's been divided, Member Hart, Vice Chair Hart seconds, and back to you, Member Klein.
Okay. It took out the primary instruction and made it just instructional materials. Does that include supplemental instructional materials?
Would the maker like that, or on to Superintendent Stallings?
So I would refer to the law itself, and if you go to the law, instructional materials, it outlines what it is. Supplemental materials means material that an educator selects for classroom use in a charter school. Yeah, so they're selecting that for classroom use. So
So does it include that or no?
it would not. The law doesn't include that.
Then I would make a motion to include that.
So we have
Instructional material, including supplemental.
so we have a motion to amend, and that would be in order, be the second
Yes.
motion, but let's get some specific language up there.
I think, so if the teacher brings anything in now, they can't supplement anything. It now becomes, they have to go through a parent committee.
Right.
Meaning if you were to
Well, let's frame it up, Member Klein, see if there's a second, and we can get into the substance of it.
So, yeah, I can't see it, but just after instructional material, it would, I guess, put including supplemental and supplemental.
Okay, because I think there is a distinction between instructional material and supplemental material in the law, correct?
Yes.
The first typically requiring parent review. So instructional materials and supplemental materials, would that capture the intent of the motion?
Yes.
Okay. So the motion is that line 10 be amended to say which require LEAs to make instructional materials and supplemental materials available for parent review and involve parents of students in the LEA in reviewing instructional materials. Would that also include supplemental materials, Member Klein, on line 12?
Yes.
Each place that it says instructional materials, you would
Yes.
add and supplemental materials?
Correct.
It's up to you. You're okay. Okay. Is there a second? Seconded by Member Bogus. First back to you, Member Klein, then we'll come back to Member Bogus.
I don't have anything to say.
Okay, Member Vargas?
So, as this reads, I believe Member Klein is attempting to amend lines 10 through 12. And it would then read sections X and X, which require LEAs to make instructional and supplemental materials available. I'm not certain that that's actually a truthful statement. I think it then comes in contravention to the code. And so I'm a little confused. I'm not disagreeing with the intent of the motion, but I don't believe that the motion itself reconciles the codified language.
Okay, further discussion, comment, Member Reel, or is that Member Lear?
That would be me.
Member Lear.
I have a question for the maker of the motion.
Okay,
I'm just trying to understand that this means that if a teacher came up with something the day before a lesson that she's preparing for a classroom, a cartoon or a quote or something else, that couldn't be used unless it was cleared by some parent committee? Is that accurate in my understanding?
Member Klein, would you like to respond to that question? It's up to you.
Well, I think there's a lot of, I think where we end up having the most problems is in the supplemental materials area. And so if we're making a rule to vet materials in order to prevent problem materials from being used in the classroom, but it doesn't address the part of instruction or materials that is most commonly the offender, then does the rule really do anything? I mean, it does to some extent, but where the offenses happen are generally in that supplemental materials area.
Okay, thank you. Vice Chair Earl?
Yeah, I actually think it's in conflict with the law, because the law, by definition in the law, it says supplemental materials is an learning material that an educator selects for classroom use. But then it also goes further to, on B, it says a charter school, I'm reading the charter school section, governing board has not considered, adopted, approved, or prohibited. So it's actually in conflict with the law to say now you have to do these things, but the supplemental definition itself says you don't do those things. So it becomes in conflict with law.
Okay.
Maybe, at least the
understand.
way I'm reading it. Maybe someone else can.
I
Okay.
withdraw my motion.
Motion withdrawn? Well, let's see. It's any objection? It does, which is, so that's why I bring it for objection. Any objection from the body to withdrawing the motion? Okay. We'll allow that to be withdrawn then, and that brings us back to the motion, which is to approve those lines of 10 to 14, the changes made to those. Member Vargas.
So, Chair, I would just offer that Member Klein's motion, in the context of 10 through 12, made no sense, but the reframing the language would cause it to make sense. And I would just ask if she has language that is different from what she proposed.
Member Klein.
I
would
do
you
not
like to-
have- I do not have that prepared. If somebody else would like to put that forward, I think that would be great.
Okay, floor is open. Discussion, motions. I don't see any lights. Seeing no lights, the motion then is to approve the changes from Vice Chair Earl reflected on lines, I think it's actually 8 through 14. Seeing no further lights, please vote. Sorry, Member Klein?
Sorry, just I'm trying to go off my one screen and I can't see the bill or the language of the rule. What lines does it designate how
The
they are
changes-
chosen? The committee. That's later on, right? I'll wait if that's later on.
Correct, yes. The element of involvement of parents reflective
Yeah.
or just of students enrolled was the part divided from this.
Or who's on the committee.
Correct,
Yeah.
I believe, right?
Okay.
Yes. Okay, Member Hymas?
I'm voting yes. Thank you.
Hymas is yes. Vice Chair, or excuse me, Member Klein?
Yes.
Member Klein is a yes. That passes unanimously. That leaves us with the material divided, which is on lines 25 to 27. Is there a motion on that language? As I recall, it has to be separately moved once it's been divided.
I'll
so-
make a motion that we strike reflective of schools community as in those three areas.
I would second that.
And the language added previously was
Sorry.
of students enrolled in, correct?
Right, that is correct.
Okay. So this is contained in lines, let's see.
25 through 32.
Yes, moving what moved previously but was divided on lines 25 to 33. Discussion of that motion.
And
Member-
can I speak to
yes,
my
back to
motion
you,
real
sorry.
quick? Just to, once again, especially in one, if you're saying it's reflective of schools community, then it feels like you're narrowing it down to, and I'm not sure once again, what reflective of schools community is, so you can maybe articulate that. If you're living in the community, you would be reflective of the community. And so are we restricting that down to only certain groups can look at LEA purchased instructional materials and consider that? Then there's the complaints is next. And then the third one, actually it does say an LEA may seek assistance from parent organizations or associations or other groups to recruit and select parent members. And if you strike that for the purposes of described, you don't need the reflective of schools community. You have the ability to do that with the language that's there already. If you have a music group or whatever that's interested in the feedback on the musical items or whatever. But if you have a greater way of articulating, I don't know, the reflective of schools community doesn't seem like it needs to be there. So.
Okay, Member Lear?
This motion because I think that the message is clear, and this is partially in response also, or in response, excuse me, to Member Earl's, Vice Chair Earl's comment previously about she feels like it narrows it. I feel like the message is clear and reflective of the school's community. And maybe I'm more sensitive to that because the communities in Salt Lake District, which I represent, and for the principal we heard from today, also increasingly in Park City, are very diverse communities. So if whoever's setting up the committee chooses the most persistent parents or the most obsessed parents or the most, let me think of a less loaded word, the most typically involved parents, then you may not get a committee that is reflective of the community, which again, at East High School is a majority school now, where there are more minority students than there are majority school students. But I think the people at East High and my neighbors would tell you that those who are most involved in these issues are often the parents who live on the east side of the high school's area and district, sometimes because they have more time, sometimes because there's more two-parent families. But we would want a committee like this to reflect all of the members, whether it be ethnic minority or refugee or low or higher income, and we would like a committee that would reflect that in order to choose these materials, vet the complaints, a variety of other reasons. So that's the way I'm looking at reflective of the school's community. And if you have a very homogeneous community, then that might be easier, might be more straightforward. But in the districts that I represent, the communities are very diverse, and we would want to encourage those committees to be made up of representatives from all the different students and families that are included, excuse me, in that community. So that's what I mean by reflective, and that's what I think the language says to most people.
Thank you, Member Lear. Who do we have? Davis and Norton? Member Davis and then Member Norton.
Chair, I would just say, I saw a great example of this in Greenwood Elementary when I was visiting with school community councils and their parent groups, and they changed the times of their meetings to be more reflective of the school community. Instead of having the meeting in the middle of the school day, they moved all their parent meetings to nighttime to be able to have a parent that of a lot of the kids didn't have one parent that stayed at home and one parent that went to work. And some of them had two working parents or on different shifts and things like that. And so by moving to an evening time frame, it became more reflective of the school community and not just the parents who could come every time at this one time that was convenient for the principal per se.
Member Norton.
One of the things that I was looking at with the, as I compared the two pieces of language, was school community and enrolled in the LEA. And one of the things that brought to mind for me was that an LEA parent, for instance, if we are picking a curriculum for our elementary reading, we could end up with a lot of parents that are secondary parents. And so I think that I like the fact that it's, the school is listed, reflective of the school, because it might be a group of elementary school students, and it should be, the parents that are included would be elementary students, not just any parent from the LEA.
Thank you. Member Klein?
Sorry, no comment. Take my
I
hand
have
down.
just a
Oh,
quick
okay.
comment.
Thank you. Vice Chair Earl?
If you're looking at one, it is talking about LEA purchased instructional materials. That is specific to the LEA, not to a school, even though a school may be using them. So it's that broader group that's going to be evaluating those. So anyways.
Okay. Member Bogus?
Thank you, ma'am. And I would just offer that just because I don't have a student in the local high school doesn't mean I don't have one in middle school or elementary school. And those instructional materials will affect my children because they will eventually be exposed to them. So excluding them from that process just doesn't seem super inclusive to me. And I think that's one of the goals, is to hear all voices. So.
Any further? I see no lights. Yes.
I just want to make one more comment. I think this, the addition of the language that's been struck by Vice Chair Earl's amendment takes, in some ways, doesn't encourage the LEAs in the way we want them to be encouraged, to include all members. And that's something that the board is usually focused on in rules, is to say, consider this, and as Member Earl rightly points out, later in the rule it allows the LEA to tap into other resources in the community. But I think it's important to urge LEAs to think of this as they choose these committees, and make sure it's not just the persistent, the always present parents, but it's also parents who have maybe less opportunity to be involved, because curriculum choice, as Member Bogus points out, is super important to probably all parents in the community, whether they have children in those schools or not.
Thank you, Member Lear. I'll just add,
All the nasty cows.
I appreciate those statements of intent from Member Lear, that you want to cast a broad net. I had heard from some that the language suggests they might have to second guess, did I pick enough of this and enough of that, which gave them pause. And so I think the amendment broadens it to students enrolled, with the idea that we do want LEAs to involve a good cross-section of parents, but not have to kind of think in terms of, this much of this and this much of that. So I'm in favor of the amendment for that reason. And Member Vice Chair Hart?
For me, I struggle a little bit when it says an LEA shall involve parents reflective of the school's community. So I'm coming at it from an LEA lead perspective. Am I supposed to, reflect one school's community when I'm selecting LEA materials? That, like, I don't understand how I'm supposed to do that. Like, just practically speaking. Now, if it was reflective of the LEA's community, maybe, but I'm asking an honest question. It's not, what community am I supposed to pick if I'm picking LEA materials? That, I just need clarification.
From whom? I see Member Lyra's offering. And then
Kind
let's
of
key
response,
this
there
up.
may be others, but my understanding in the code now allows LEAs to not schools within LEAs to choose their own curricula. So it may not be what every LEA does or has or every school wants. Your situation in a charter position may be more, you may be more holistic in your choices, but I know in traditional LEAs, the schools literally have the choice of different kinds of curriculum materials, depending on the LEA you're targeting or talking about.
And clarification, even in the large LEA I was in, we were not allowed to choose by school. So I'm just looking, I look at rules pragmatically, like, can I do this? What's the cost of doing this? How easily can I screw this up? And I understand the reflective piece. I'm just not sure that wording gets it there. There's something that there's either more clarification needed. And the other thing is, I'm interested in the most amount of flexibility. When you're talking, I think music was brought up. When you're choosing a music curriculum, you may want subject matter experts, and then you've got the additional problem of, okay, now I need the experts, now I need to balance it, and I just worry that there's pitfalls, and then I would be accused of doing something that I certainly didn't intend to do. So for me, that's why I try to keep it as flexible and as simple as possible, but I completely understand the need to include all members of a group, so that you're not just choosing the ones that raise their hand the highest. So I just have that conflict there, and so I'm actually not happy with either.
All right. Are we in a state of ambivalence such that we can vote? We're okay. Member Davis and member, I think we got Member Lyra. Member Davis.
Yeah, I think I think a technical change needs to be made just to make it grammatically make sense within the context of the rule, and that apostrophe needs to change to after the S. It needs to be reflective of the schools. Some schools may share a certain, type of community. There may be different. You could even add an apostrophe IES after the Y in community to make it technically and grammatically make sense. But I've heard Chair Moss, you say it's important to have a cross section of parents represented. I've heard Vice Chair Hart say it's important to have all different types of students involved, and if so, then we should say that. Then it should be reflective of the school's community, and it doesn't have any numbers associated. You have to have one of each of every. It just be thoughtful. If you have to move your meeting to the nighttime, so some of your parents can come that never get to come, move it. Just try to create a group that's reflective of your community, and not the same 5 that come to every single meeting every time, all the time, because they're easy to schedule or to get to come. That came out wrong. Sorry.
We understood. We understood.
May I comment?
And I guess, well, for my part, I think they should do that, but I don't think they need to be told what that looks like, and I think this language has felt more restrictive. Is my feedback. So, I heard one other hand before we vote, or a voice. Did I hear? I
yes,
heard
this
an
is
online voice. Member
Member
Klein.
Klein.
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm just, when I hear schools community or communities within the school, it sounds like schools are devolving into tribalism, and it's going to end up being turf wars, and in such, the individual gets lost and is no longer represented because if they choose not to identify as one of those groups or communities within the school. And so I would speak in favor of Member Earl's language, just include parents of students enrolled in the LEA. And usually those parents that want to be involved are going to be the ones that step forward. If you go recruiting others, I think you will find that you don't get, you can't count on them because maybe their schedules are not conducive, or they're just not interested, or any other number of reasons. They don't feel like they're capable. Nobody wants to be on a committee that they don't feel like they qualify to be on, or that they're not prepared to be on. And so if we're just going to go find anybody, they may not want to be on it, and meaning they're not going to be committed, and they're not going to be as invested in the process. So I think parents that volunteer, there's a reason they volunteer. And maybe other parents that can't volunteer are really grateful for those parents that do. And that's just my thoughts.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other lights, let's vote. And I'll just remind members, we do have a hard stop. We've got some strategic planning and legislative financial priorities to wrap up as well. So let's take a vote and move it along.
Can you repeat the motion?
The motion is as previously presented by Vice Chair Earl to amend lines 24 through 32, correct? 25 through 34. I think the last changes are on 32, but yeah, 34. Online members, can you see, or do you need reading?
Yes. Board Member Klein is a yes.
Okay. Member Hymas.
Hymas is a
Hymas is what?
yes.
Hymas is
Yes.
yes. Okay. That stands at 7-7. It is a tie with the no votes being Member Davis, Member Lear, Member Reel, Member Norton, Member Booth, Member Wood, and Member Straight. So that motion fails. So that leaves us with one amendment among those divided passed, one failed, and we're back to the underlying motion as amended, which is that the board, let's see, the board approved. Could you roll up just a little bit on there we go, that the board continue and approve R277-468 draft 2 as amended on second and final reading. Any final discussion? If not, please vote.
Did any of the amendments pass?
Yes, the prior amendment, it was divided. The first amendment passed. That was changes to, let's see, it struck primary instruction and just stated instructional materials. Well, hang on. Did we trace that all the way through? We did pass. We considered a further amendment, which failed, correct? And then we did pass the underlying. Okay. I was making sure we didn't skip a step. Right. I'm just making sure. I know we voted on the proposed amendment to the First Amendment, but we also did go back and vote on the underlying First Amendment. We did not. Okay. So that would go as amended. Well, no, it hasn't been amended. Hold on. We need to. We did pass the first part. Okay. We rejected the further amendment and passed Vice Chair Earl's part as divided. Okay. Don't want to leave little pieces and parts. Yes, I get the, passed as amended. I just wasn't sure if we actually amended. I know we rejected the further amendment. Okay, here we go. We are voting to continue and approve R277-468, Parents Review of Public Education Curriculum, Review of Complaint Process, Draft 1 as amended, on second and final reading. Please vote. Member Hymas?
Yes.
Member Klein?
Abstain.
Member Klein abstains. Let's see, we're missing one. There we go. That motion passes by a vote 12 to 1 to 1. Member Klein abstaining and Member Bogus voting no. Thank you. Back to Vice Chair Carey.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. This is item 4.10, GED Options Program, and the motion for the board is that the committee recommends that the board approve the GED Options Program and recommend that staff bring to the committee any rule changes that would be needed to implement the program in the October meeting. This motion passed 3-2 in law and licensing.
Okay, discussion to that motion. Member Bogus and then Wood.
Thank you, sir. Chair, I'm wondering why we're getting the rule after we're getting the changes. It seems to me like that's upside down.
Is that a question for maybe Deputy Stallings?
Thank you. So the document presented outlined the structure of the program, and then what will happen is what the staff wanted was to see if board members had feedback or if they supported it, and then we will take the essentially the summary of the program and put it into board rules so that it is law. It's a legal new GED option, if that makes sense.
May I follow up? I did.
Did that answer the question?
No, I asked if I could follow up.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. You may.
So my question would be, should this be approved today, we can come back and amend this after looking at what the rule says?
Yes.
We're not going to be tied into this, and we don't have to go through 7 hoops of crazy chaos to come back to this motion today if the rule indicates and states things that we are uncomfortable with.
The intent of this motion, and the reason why staff brought it first was to just vet it first before bringing it in rule form. And so approving this today won't inhibit you from making changes to the rule, I think that's what you're asking. You will be able to make changes in the rule. The rule will trump this document,
And the rule will come,
probably in October.
okay.
And while I understand that, my bigger concern, as opposed to amending the rule, is to amend this, what we're approving today. Let's say the rule comes and we're like, wow, I didn't see that. We're not bound by this, and we don't have to jump through 6 hoops and agendaizing in 3 people to come back to this option that we're talking about today.
The rule would trump whatever is in this document, because this document is not law. It's just a concept that was meant to describe what staff are hoping would eventually be put in the rule. So the rule will be actually the implementing or the authorizing item. And because this one is a pretty big change, staff, normally, I think to your point, Board Member Bogus, normally we would have brought this document and then you do a rule, and then the rule incorporates that document by reference. I think because this is kind of a novel idea, staff wanted to bring the concept first instead of working on a rule at the same time, just to see what the response was and to get feedback. But the rule won't necessarily be incorporating by reference, but if it does, it will come back again. So that document would come and then the rule would incorporate it by reference. So you'd have that option in October to amend the document.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. Vice Chair Earl?
And I think where I'm getting hung up too is when we're approving the GED options program. Like we're approving the program today, and maybe, I don't know if that's where we're not actually approving the program today. What we're approving is moving the program forward, right? So it can be put into, yes.
I think maybe what we could do is if someone would like to make a substitute motion, and we would just say that the board approves staff bringing a rule changes that support what was presented. Does that make sense? So then you're not approving the document, but instead directing staff to bring a rule that would support what was presented.
I'll make that motion just because otherwise it does say
Yeah,
we just
that's-
approved this.
I think that makes
So,
sense. It looks like a substitute motion is being drafted now, Vice Chair.
all right. Well, okay, now that I got a second, let's. Okay, I make a substitute motion that the board direct staff to bring rule changes supporting the proposed GED options program. Yeah. Oh. Yeah, but the board is directing staff. Oh, I could add in there for law and licensing. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Can you add that in? For law and licensing, yes. Sorry, I thought that was maybe understood.
Okay, did we already, I think we did get a second. So did we get the maker and the second, Member Wood?
I voted for this in committee as I saw it as an extra tool. As I have talked to my districts that I, within my district, they have voiced a lot of concerns about this. One comment was state-sponsored mediocrity and feeling like that the GED tests do not rise to the level of rigor and competency required for graduation. And so I will be voting no this time.
I have a comment as well.
What's the lineup here?
Well, we gotta either do substitute or.
And it keeps making.
Is there a procedural, do we have it framed up
Yeah.
and seconded? Okay. All right, so
So I do have a
Who's
question,
up?
sir.
Member
And that question
Bogus?
is,
Okay.
excuse me, is this something the board is doing of their own volition, or is this something that has been pushed upon us by the legislature?
Anybody want to speak to the source of the GED option program as it's been framed up? Who? Oh, Stephanie Patton? Thank you for coming up.
Stephanie Patton, Adult Education Coordinator. This was brought up by the board or by the staff in response to concerns from the field. Yeah.
I have a question.
Member Klein's up next. Member Klein.
Does the GED options program exist in other states? And then my other question or concern is students that go for their GED are looking to, maybe they've already left the system and they're trying to just finish up in their own way, or they're doing it in order to get out earlier. But the way it was described in the background paragraph is that it would require the students to stay in the program, or at least give them the option to stay at the school so that they're receiving what the other students are receiving, which I think is not what the GED has traditionally been about. And so I'm wondering if it's just a way to keep kids in the system longer, kids that would normally not want to stay in it any longer.
Any response to that? Oh, Stephanie?
Yeah, great questions. So it is, the GED options program is in other states, 12 currently. In the backup, you can see a little map of where those states are. 12. Yeah, 12 states. The intent is to keep students engaged. Again, this isn't about students who are graduating early. This is students who are severely credit deficient in an attempt to keep them engaged in the K-12 system.
So follow up, are students going to be denied a GED if they don't stay engaged at the school?
Do you want to respond?
I'm not sure exactly.
Could you clarify the question, Member Klein?
Yeah.
Is that what we're asking?
Well, a lot of kids leave the system and then work towards getting their GED independent of the system. If this was to pass, is it going to require that kids stay in the system in order to get their GED?
Would
Just
it
like they would
preclude
have to if they wanted to get a graduation diploma.
Yeah, would it preclude the track that's currently available? Okay, so they
No,
could stay
no.
on the same track, but they would be a completer rather than a graduate, or they could do this and become a graduate.
Yeah,
So-
it would not take away the options that are already available. It would add an other option.
Got it. Okay, Vice Chair Hart.
So I support this program. I think it's another option. It doesn't close down any door, although if you want to talk about rigor, it's the GED is definitely more rigorous than packets. So there's that. I realize that, you know, the gold standard would be a child doesn't become credit deficient by the time they hit high school, but the reality is that we have students in those cases. And if we don't try to find solutions for that, and if we don't work to support students, that GED is not an easy test. It is not the most rigorous test. It's not an AP test, but it's not easy. So I just see it as another choice for students that have very few choices at that time. I also see this conceptually, and we haven't seen the rule. So I'm interested in seeing this fleshed out, and I just think options should be available to those students, and currently there aren't. What happens in high schools is it gets very complicated because of the graduation rate being a high stakes indicator. And so it ends up causing the system to do all kinds of somersaults. And I think that we should probably look at the whole gamut of options for students before we discount an option that has promise for students to become a completer. So.
Okay, thank you. What's the lineup? Member Lear and Straight and Carey.
I did vote no in committee on this, and I also have had some discussions with folks since, and there are really conflicting opinions. And I am usually one who would defer to staff and say, you know more about this than I do, you've looked at it more carefully. But I also have this sort of core notion that being in high school is a good thing for students. And I'm not understanding, I don't know if I heard you wrong, Stephanie, or I didn't understand before, but when a student gets a GED, passes a GED, the school no longer gets a WPU for that student. Isn't that accurate? Oh, and I
Yeah,
should have asked if I can ask questions.
They actually have to be withdrawn before they can take the GED. So
Right.
they're not being counted towards the WPU before they're even taking the first test. Does that make sense currently?
Right. And so when you talk about keeping them engaged, they aren't really staying engaged. Whichever program, once they take a GED, they're out of the public education system, and they no longer have funding that follows them, right?
That is true in the current case, but this would this would not require that they withdraw from K-12 before they take the test, so that schools could actually incorporate the preparation for the test as a part of their curriculum, and then they take the test and they continue on to make sure all of the graduation requirements are met and end up with a high school diploma instead of a Utah high school completion diploma. And that is why actually this has to come to you, right? Because current board rule does not allow that to happen.
Right,
they have
right.
to withdraw first.
And that's a piece I either didn't remember from our committee discussion, or we didn't ask the right access questions, and so I didn't know that. That does make me more interested in seeing what a rule would look like, but no buts. And I think for me, a priority is keeping students in school. I think it's a good place to be. I don't really have, it's one of the reasons I've been such a fan of the handful of charter schools that work very, very hard with the most difficult to teach students, because those charter schools keep them engaged. It is their school's prime directive to keep them engaged in some kind of a school experience, hoping they'll catch that spark that will give them something meaningful then to leave the public education system with. So I'm probably still I'm going to vote yes this time, just to see what the rule looks like. But I think it's just super important that we don't use this as a way to get difficult students out of our system. I know it's hard. I taught at a school, especially in the era I taught there, where it was really hard to keep students enrolled. And I think now how hard it was for those students to achieve after they dropped out. So I'm very sensitive to wanting, I think high schools are great places for people to be. Yes, there are exceptions, there are anomalies, but I'm really reluctant to spend too much effort and money in getting kids out of our system, which is how it feels. So I want to see what the rule looks like. Thank you
Okay.
for those responses. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Member Lear. Member Straight? Is it? Okay.
Yes, so Chair, I have a couple questions, and you can direct it as you wish. So there's a comment made about state-sponsored mediocrity. Is that specific to something, or is that just a general statement to the whole thing? And the other question is that, you know, my experience, I also heard that from the field, that this has been requested from the field. What specifically has been requested from the field that is different than what we already do? Because my experience is that we do everything in our power now to keep kids in the system. Only when they get to the point that they're not going to make it, they're so deficient, do we send them to other pathways. But there are many options. So I'd like to know a little bit more specifics about mediocrity, and I'd also like to know what exactly came from the field that is different than what we're already doing.
Gotcha. And I can't recall who had received the feedback on state-sponsored. Member Wood? Yeah, any response?
I can just clarify, it was the fact that they are taking, so if they pass the math test, that's equivalent to 3 credits of math. If they pass the science test, it's equivalent to 3. And they said it's not equivalent. In their mind, it's not equivalent to the core classes that our teachers are teaching, that passing that is not equivalent to the information and knowledge that they gain through the school, through those classes. And that's where it came from. Does that help?
Okay. And on the other point, what specifically from the field was requested in the nature of changing what's already available? Anybody want to weigh in on that one? Stephanie?
Yeah, so it's board member Straight mentioned, you know, it works until they're so credit deficient that they're not going to make it. And those are the students that we're talking about. The ones that are so severely credit deficient that everyone knows they're not going to make it. This gives them an option to make it. That's who we're talking about exactly. And those students are not receiving the same instruction. Board member or Vice Chair Hart mentioned this as well, right? Those students are not receiving the same types of education and rigor, right? When you're talking about packets, when you're talking about go and watch, they're not receiving the same. And then they end up in adult education. We have less than $1,000 per student. We can't provide them with the same level of education. We just can't, right? That happens in K-12. We don't have transportation. We don't have all of the supportive services that K-12 does. That's what happens with these students because they're so severely credit deficient. So we're talking about keeping those students engaged and giving them a better option.
Thank you. Maybe I could. Superintendent. Well, just very briefly. I mean, I don't know if you probably thought this through. There's always this question of moral hazard. By helping those who need it, do you incentivize some to maybe fall into that track rather than staying on the regular track? Is there anything in there that would suggest that, well, hey, I got that backup. I can let myself become credit deficient because there's a new way to get out of it. Did you think through that? Is there any kind of analysis of whether that in fact might be a risk or whether elements of the program would hedge against that risk?
Yeah, first of all, it's not just every student, right? So there's that meeting that's written in the draft where everyone's meeting together and determining that this is the right step for the student. There is, again, we define what severely credit deficient is, so you have to be at a certain level. And generally, in adult education, we've had concerns brought up similar to this, right? Like, we have a 24 credit diploma, and that's not the norm for most high schools, right? So then everyone's going to drop out so they can go to adult education and get a 24 credit diploma. It doesn't happen at scale. I'm not going to say it doesn't happen at all, but it doesn't happen on any large scale. Students want to succeed. They want to be successful. Some fall through the cracks and are not for whatever, a variety of reasons. This offers an additional option for those students.
That helps. Sorry, back to the order. Was it member? Oh, superintendent had a comment, and then we'll go to member Carrie and Vargas.
Thank you, Chair Moss. So I'm going to disclose my bias about this topic as the heart of a school counselor that's embedded in a state superintendent who loves to interview students. And I think they're our best resource for data. Too often when I'm in schools that Member Lear has mentioned, or I find a kid under the stairs, not going to class in a high school, and they tell me about their credit deficiency for whatever reason. They had a family trauma, they were sick, something happened, they moved, they just stopped going to school, and they are very credit deficient, and they feel hopeless. And often what happens is, whether it's a well-meaning counselor or a teacher or a parent, somebody says to them, you know, you should just drop out and get your GED because you're not going to qualify for graduation. I've heard that. I heard that when I was a counselor and I was trying to save kids and keep them in the system where I knew that they would get support and we could continue to work with the family. I hear it today. And we have a school full of kids with that story who come without any credits their freshman, sophomore year. In my estimation, what this would do is reverse that trend for this small population, small n size, instead of saying, well, you now have to leave a system where you could have nurturing, caring adults in the system to support you and go take your GED. If we're really passionate about things like getting your first credential in high school, getting an industry certificate, getting an associate's degree, whatever it is, and having a diploma that when you walk away, you have the next opportunity ready to launch, then our kids can stay in high school, make up the credits, get the support they need, and maybe get an industry credential so that they are participating citizens when they leave our schools. That's something unique that we have been waiting for and looking for. Now, I'll counter that claim with concerns that we've heard, and I think Member Wood expressed it aptly, and that is we've heard from members of our own staff in committee who expressed concern and in the field. Well, wouldn't this incentivize a student to just say, I'm just gonna kind of give up and not really work and then take this thing and then stay in school? Those are not the students that are staying in school. I used to think it was harder for kids to, when I was a school counselor and would see credit deficiency and kids were still coming to school, I used to think it's harder to fail than it is to get like a D or, like it's hard to fail. You have to work at it really in some ways to fail. And this is an option for students that we don't currently have that would enable them to stay in school, get the support, work with families, and continue on, and maybe again get that industry certificate so that when they leave school they have opportunities and options that they currently don't have. So thank you for letting me stand on my soapbox. I'll take it down a notch.
Thank you. No, I appreciate addressing that question. I think there's always a question of whether unseen incentives are built in, but I think it's been thought through, and we're trying to address a specific population and not incentivize others to jump into that population. So I appreciate the thought of that consideration. Member Carey?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to speak in favor of this proposal. And the reason I do so is I think it's fantastic that there's only 12 states doing it. I wish, it means that we're at the forefront, right? And I love the fact that this isn't born from legislation, because it means that our staff at USBE, they've been listening to the stakeholders, and they said, we don't need legislation on this. We see that there's a deficiency. We're going to act on it. So I think all those things are fantastic. And I would just want to add that I think if I understand the program correctly, we're actually keeping students who would otherwise exit our public schools sooner. They're now incentivized to stay longer. And to me, when you have that student who is so credit deficient, and through a teacher or a parent or a counselor, they're tempted, maybe there's a shot. And when they make that decision to go for it, I think that's when we need these things like transportation, the meals, the counselors, the teachers. And without this program, they're left to climb that mountain by themselves. And, Superintendent Dixon tied sometimes the exiting or the credit deficiency to a trauma, an accident, but I think sometimes students they bloom at different times. And you get a student who wakes up one day and says, you know what, I should have paid more attention. I think at that critical juncture, we need all of these supports. And that's why I want to see the rule and pursue this program. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Carey. Let's see, Bogus and Davis.
Thank you, sir. So I want to bring us back to the substitute motion because I think it's fundamentally different from the main motion. And I'm much more comfortable with this. I still have great consternation because it seems we're passing something to see what's in it. And that seems to be bad policy making process. I'm also concerned that as I listen to people talk, I think we have 504s, we have IEPs, we have specialized education plans, and now we're adding one more thing for the school to do when we already have systems in place to accommodate almost everything that's been discussed. As I listen to Member Carey, I cheer. I'm like, yeah, we do need that. We do need that. But we have that. And now we're putting it in a different place. And so I guess I'm wondering what this does that we don't already have a pathway or a process or a system enabled, if you will, that can reach the same end.
Okay, thank you, Member Davis.
I admittedly have not delved deeply into this, but I actually agree with everything that everyone previously has said, and the concerns and the reasons to cheer. my question is this: what is it actually equivalent to? Because when I was working as a in the special ed department in one of our local districts, we got called to court because a student with severe intellectual disabilities graduated from high school with a 3.8 GPA, and in court we were told, what is indicated on your transcript to show it means what it means? So is a GED equivalent, the skills that are demonstrated, I understand and can do this, is it equivalent to the courses that will be with a high school graduation? And if not, how is that indicated on the transcript so that employers or universities or court judges can understand what's equivalent to what? And I don't know. And maybe these sections of math, or it's the skills will be equivalent to what they could demonstrate had they just sat in the seat time. But who has the answers to those questions? Chair, who has the answers to those questions?
Coordinator Patton, did you want to answer that?
So they would, on the transcript, it would say, right, GED mathematics or whatever. So the transcript would actually indicate that those credits were gained through the GED versus, is that the answer you're looking for?
May I follow up, Chair?
Yes.
So the course titles would not be on the high school transcript. And would the diploma indicate anything different, or would it be just a regular high school diploma?
The diploma would be if you're graduating from Viewmont High School, it would be a Viewmont High School diploma. But the transcript would indicate that the course name, and we would have to create Cactus course codes additionally, right, that match that. It would indicate that it was GED.
I mean, I can't imagine every student not wanting to do it, but thank you.
Okay, so can I add just one thing?
Yeah.
Just when you ask what's the value, I actually had a son that did the GED and got college credit. So it's not like, oh, we're just filling in the, whatever. It's actually aligned in such a way that the colleges you will get college credit for certain things if you do well in certain areas. So it's, if you want to know, yes, it's not seat time for, whatever, and listening to a lecture or whatever from, or group, class things. It's not the same, but once again, I think you're talking about students in a specific category to get a specific area, and it is aligned with certain expectations. So.
Sure.
My comment was not the value. My question was, what skills are gained in the process of getting this? Are the skills similar? That was what my question was. I actually see the value of an option like this for students. I just am wondering what the skills and understandings are and the content, and are they similar to what students are going to need?
Coordinator Patton, did you want to respond? You don't have to.
Yeah.
I thought I saw you leaning in.
No, I would like to, so thank you. I mean, it's important to remember that the test is, lots of time and money has been spent, right? Has been spent to make this aligned with the Common Core state standards and appropriately leveled for a typical high school graduate. Maybe not an A+, right? When you get 150, you may not be it may not be the same level as an A+, but a typical high school graduate for the 145 passing score. There are different levels on the GED that's more reflective of what you would see in a high school transcript. So if you're getting a 145, again, that might not be an A+ student, but if you're getting a 175, where Vice Chair Earl mentioned that there's actually college credits that are associated with that, and that's possible. 175 that score reflects college ready plus credits. 165 reflects college ready. So, and those levels are approved by ACE, which is the Association for the Council on Education, I think. And they do the CLEP and the AP tests, so a respected board. So depending on where you get it, right? Depends on, but they are aligned with the Common Core state standards, rigorous statisticians and psychometricians who have created this test. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Might have. To the question earlier, what do we really want to be when we grow up? We might want to switch into psychometricians. All right. Any further lights discussion on the motion? I don't. Oh, Member Straight. Okay. And lunch is apparently here.
Oh,
Let's see
thank
where
you, Chair.
we get.
I'll be brief. I just asked questions last time. I didn't even make a statement as to what I'm thinking on this, because I'm actually thinking a whole lot of things. There's a part of me that really grasps on this idea of, do our schools really represent academic excellence, and what does that mean, and how do we get there? And as I've listened to this discussion, I think you get hit from either side no matter what decision you make on this. So where I usually err when it comes to things like this is I go back to when I was a teacher, when I was in the trenches, and actually saw this in action. I also was over PM school, where students who did not attend the regular day were looking at dropping out. We said, well, we have an option where you can come to school after school's out. There were lots of reasons for that. I don't even want to get into that. But in the end, we helped students graduate. I also was a teacher within that program for a period of time, and had a student who needed their financial literacy credit, and you have to have that for graduation. But he had a job, and he could only make it once a week. And so I would give him a week's worth of lessons, and we'd get together and we'd go over what he'd learned. He received these credits. He was a stellar student. But here was a kid who was down on his luck, that did not have the basic things that he needed without working. He was basically, he was on his own as a high school senior. Okay? Balancing that out. I was thinking also of another student who came to me as a senior and said, remember last year during this quarter when I was so close to getting a passing grade, and you came and offered me an option that I could accomplish that. I didn't do it. I'm sorry. Would you still, a year later, allow me to do it? Well, guess what? This happens every time. And so, it really, in the end, is about people. On the other hand, as a policy, if this represents this and we're saying it's equivalent, I'm not necessarily philosophically in line with that. So there's some things within here that I'm philosophically not in favor of, but then my heart gets in the way. And I shouldn't say it gets in the way, because that's not really true. It is the way for me. That's how I am. And so I'm going to vote to move this forward, because this isn't the last word to be said. And but I would like to see maybe a little more discussion and thought along some of these areas, because I was in the same meeting as Board Member Wood, where that was expressed, and it was very specific to something. And so I think we're close. I really think we're close. I think there's more good than bad. So that's my final 2 cents. There's my opinion now.
Hey, thank you, Member Straight. Let's see, do we have, is your light on or you, I can't, okay. Apologize, I couldn't see that. Member Wood.
I really appreciate the discussion. And with the change in the motion, that we're going to see what it is before we vote on it. I will vote to move this forward, but I will have a lot of conversations with counselors in my districts. You know, I was looking at district leadership and even some legislators. There was a legislative breakfast that I was at. I was surprised, actually, given the makeup of some of my districts, that they were so opposed to it. But I'm willing to go and do the homework because that's what I do, and I won't shut things down that may help students.
Okay, thank you, Member Wood. Seeing no other lights, I believe we can vote. The motion is the substitute motion from Vice Chair Earl that the board directs staff to bring rule changes supporting the proposed GED options program to an upcoming meeting of the Law and Licensing Committee. Members, please vote. Member Hymas?
Hymas is no.
Member Klein?
Member Klein is a no.
Okay, that passes 11 to 1 to 2. Member Bogus abstaining. Members Hymas and Klein voting no. Let's see. Yeah, back to you, Vice Chair Carey.
Thank you, Chair. The next item on from Law and Licensing is item 4.11, R277-333, Registered Apprentice Program for Teachers. And the proposed motion is that the committee recommends that the board approve R277-333, Registered Apprentice Program for Teachers, Draft 2, on second and final reading. This motion passed out of Law and Licensing unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Oh, Member Bogus. There we go.
Yes, sir. So, through the chair, I'm wondering, is there now an interagency agreement, and does the Department of Labor somehow get all these names?
Anyone like to field that? Director Height? Director?
And I want to be clear
Assistant.
for my own sake, because I did leave the room for a minute. We're on 333. Is that correct? Because that's where I am. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Correct. Executive Coordinator. There you go. I'm sorry, Malia. Thank you.
That's okay.
Thanks for coming up.
Hi, I'm Malia Height, Executive Coordinator of Educator Licensing. We do have an interagency agreement with the Department of Workforce Services that is allowing us to utilize a grant to the state of Utah through the U.S. Department of Labor. And so the Department of Labor will count how many apprentices we have and where they're doing their apprenticeship, and then how, if they complete the program or not.
Does that answer the question, Member Bogus?
Yes and no. Well,
Would you like to follow
I
up?
guess it's an implied answer that there's going to be a list of all these people in a government database somewhere.
Yes, in fact, in the board rule, it's on line 79. It's the Registered Apprenticeship Partner Information Database System, which is RAPIDS.
Thank you, sir.
Follow up? Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing no. Oh, Member Carey.
Chair, if I may, and this probably for Ben Rasmussen, and just line 183 and line it was line 183, and the other line is 199. It's my understanding that both these lines permit the superintendent to reimburse the employer or the mentor. What I don't understand is that at the end of line 183, we have as funding allows, but at the line of 199, we don't. So I would just make the motion to strike as funding allows from line 183 because it strikes me as redundant. But I would like them to be consistent. So either we add it to both or we omit it from both. Does Ben or Director Rasmussen or Dr. Height have a recommendation? Chair, if I could direct that to
I'm
Dr.
sorry,
Height.
yes.
Okay.
Thank you, sorry.
That absolutely can be made. There's no reason for the difference. We do have limited funding, but the may would allow us to
The discretion.
the discretion, correct.
Then I would just make, unless this is considered a technical amendment, but if not, I would make the motion that we strike as funding allows at the end of line 183, and obviously change the comma to a period.
This may be just a technical that we could see if there's any objection. Hearing none, this appears to be a technical revision.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. All right, additional member Bogus?
Yes, sir. I'm wondering where in the rule it clearly delineates the stipulations for receiving the grant. And maybe it's not in the rule, and if it's not in the rule, then what are the stipulations for receiving the grant?
Any
I can
response?
answer that. Yeah.
Malia?
It actually is included in your backup,
Oh.
which my backup has now. It's in the agreement with the Department of Labor, are the stipulations of the grant.
I don't see that in my backup.
The approved standards, USBOE. Yeah, signed standards.
Okay, thank
So
you.
there are minimum qualifications, et cetera. Okay, any further discussion? If not, let's vote.
I just have.
Oh, sorry, Member Klein.
Member Klein, yeah, I just have concerns that the teachers have to meet the educator competency, which I feel like are woefully inadequate, and I believe I voted against when we passed it in R277304. So it appears to me that based on the way this rule is written, that you can basically become a teacher with almost zero content area knowledge, which is the opposite, I think, of what people think when they hear that we are providing high quality educators. Obviously, the public doesn't understand what we mean by high quality, that there's a very distinct definition to that, that there's a lot more to it than just really excellent teachers under that definition. And so we're not even following, well, we are, because the high quality means the competencies, which again are based on subjective soft skill, not objective content area expertise. And so I will be voting against this.
Okay, thank you, Member Klein. Member Carey?
Chair, if I may, I just want to follow up on something that Board Member Klein said to Dr. Height, which is I have heard that same concern that Board Member Klein articulated. Could you address that just for the board?
Yes, gladly. So if you look, actually, it's included in the board rule, lines 157 through 160. The first two lines indicate that all apprentices, including all individuals seeking an educator license, must demonstrate 37 general pedagogical competencies. Those are the ones that we approved recently. However, if you look at the following lines in 159 and 160, you'll see that that is where the additional content-specific competencies and training are required. So, and those competencies live within each of our content area endorsements, and we have separate competencies for elementary educators and special educators.
Okay. Member Bogus?
Thank you, Chair. So, Ms. Height? Dr. Height, yeah. So, as I'm looking at this, it appears to be dynamic and not static. Are we subject to change under the Department of Labor with this agreement? Because it looks like we're going to be at their every whim and will.
Could you clarify what you mean by static and flexible?
So dynamic means, as I read this, and I read it before, but as I'm reading it now, it appears that there's a level of dynamic, which means they can change. And through our agreement with them, we are subject to their change.
So we are, the only one who can amend this is us. We are the only ones who can instigate an amendment to this agreement.
The agreement itself, though, appears that they can change the rules and we would be subject to them.
Where are you looking specifically?
Oh,
that I
gosh,
can
it's
address
everywhere.
that question?
I can ask it offline, but yeah, so let's say they change their standards, then we're subject to their standards, or we come back and we have this conversation again.
All of the apprenticeship is based on the standards that this board has set around what makes a teacher.
But the agreement itself, is it subject to change when the Department of Labor changes their
No,
criterion?
this is a signed agreement with the Department of Labor, and we would have to instigate a change in order for the U.S. Department of Labor to change anything within the agreement.
So when they change their rules and they come out through the 90-day comment period, that's not going to affect this agreement.
This is a binding contract, correct?
So we are no longer subject to pending or impending rules from the U.S. Department of Labor.
Anything that would related to this agreement, no.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no more lights, the motion then is that, the board approves R277-333, Registered Apprentice Program for Teachers, Draft 2 on second and final reading. Please vote. Member Hymas?
Hymas is yes.
Hymas is yes. Member Klein?
No.
Member Klein is a no. And that motion passes 12-2 with the noes being Member Bogus and Member Klein. Okay. Back to Vice Chair Carey.
Thank you, Chair. We just have one remaining item, 4.12, student personal electronic devices in schools. In light of Senator Fillmore's proposed legislation that he's crafting, in addition, we've requested our committee to research both in-state and out-of-state policies. We're just holding that item, and we'll follow up with it in law and licensing.
Okay, thank you, and appreciate the work on that to coordinate with the legislature. That's been something that's been developing quickly, so nice to see progressing together on that. Anything further? Does that conclude law and licensing? Separate from law and licensing, or part of phones?
I just wondered if the bill that Senator Fillmore's developing, if that's available for others to see, or if
It's available right
Ms. Holmes.
I think it's available right now. I'm sorry, I don't have the page up, but it's already available from what I understand from the press
so it's-
conference that they gave, that you could go look and make comments and stuff.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
I'd heard they.
All right, thank you to Law and Licensing Committee. Lunch is here, so I think we're making good time. Let's see, what did we have as our lunch target? Was it 12? 12:30. What's the likelihood? We've got a hard stop later, so we're going to be bound by lunch now, or do we want to try to blast through standards and assessment? Eat. I'm hearing eat. Let's get lunch. Okay, we'll be back at 12:40 then, correct? That works? All right. Thank you. See you in a half hour.